All right. Hello, everyone. This is the voice of Dave Blattner if you don't have your webcam enabled. And I work at SAP, and I happen to have the privilege and responsibility to be an industry advisor in our aerospace and defense and our travel and transportation industries. We are delighted that you could join us today. We're going to be discussing what we are going to call the future of Industry 4.0 and really how the digitalization of your digital assets are there to enable people across your value chain within your organization and ultimately what we would call multiple business processes. I have the privilege of being joined today by two industry veterans, Peter Demchenko and John Irvin. Both of these gentlemen are from the LeverX organization, and you'll hear their voices here shortly. A couple of housekeeping rules. This session is being recorded. And for those of you that have a little overlay pane possibly in the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see some tabs with arrows. If you click on the down arrow, which is the tab titled Questions, that's where you will be able to submit questions for the panelists here today. So I'm going to serve as the moderator, and with your permission, John, let's go ahead and go to the first slide. Okay, so we've broken today's webinar down into four parts. So a little bit of, we'll call it 4 sprints. And we're going to kind of unpack Industry 4.0 into these 4 kind of high-level processes. We're going to talk a little bit about best practices as it relates to being able to leverage your 2D and 3D assets. We're then going to talk about the appropriate role of automation and integration and why that leads to a higher level of success and adoption. We'll then move on and talk about what we call the consolidation of digital information into ultimately what is called a digital thread. And for those of you that are familiar with the industry term, kind of a digital twin as well. But a digital thread, as you probably imagine, implies that there are multiple elements that come together, not just the physicality of the actual part, but there's probably a financial thread, there's a logistics thread, and so on and so forth. And all of those really become part of the ultimate elements inside of a digital twin. And then I think the last point that we'll drive home is that in reality, in Industry 4.0, we believe that the digital outcomes expand beyond just the manufacturing organization. And we're going to show you some real life examples of the other business process areas that you see there on the screen, whether that happens to be supply chain or asset management, service, and logistics. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to go and roll to the next slide. And I think this slide is going to do a really good job of now helping you visualize some of the things that we have talked about already, right? Which is digital assets can enable multiple elements within your business to be better, do better, drive out variability, cost, risk, etc. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now start to lean into my panelists. I'm first going to go ahead and ask Peter to just pick a couple of the 8 processes you see here and give us a little bit of a brief enlightenment on that. And then I'll let Peter go ahead and introduce John, and we'll let John take a thumbnail sketch of a couple more of these processes. And then we'll come back and begin the entire webinar as we'll unpack all of these for you. So Pete, over to you.
Dave. Thank you, Dave. I'm Pete Demchenko. I'm Director of Sales and Strategic Accounts for LeverX. And before that, I was at SAP for 17 years as a platinum consultant in the PLM area, as well as the practice manager for PLM. So I'm going to talk about PLM. That's where I come from. So what's really nice about this is the ability that companies go out and spend quite a bit of money. The first thing that they spend, the biggest amount of money they spend on, of course, is the ERP system, like SAP, but the second is always their CAD systems. And the systems, these are authoring systems that generate all the CAD models that are needed in the engineering and PLM area to design and develop that product and get it ready for manufacture. So there's a lot of different processes involved in engineering in the PLM areas, as collaborating with all the engineers that are on the team. And the addition of the visual capabilities is going to be a great improvement to be able to make better and quicker decisions. On the IoT side, that's the other side I'd like to pick, is now with IoT and the internet, you're going to get a lot of devices out there that are going to connect over the internet to your systems. And with these devices, companies are able to collect a lot of information. And this information collected, compiled, and then reviewed, again, helps you make better decisions. You have a great history of this data that gets collected, and being able to interrogate that data allows you to say, based on past experience, maybe this decision makes more sense in this area because we have a history of this or that. And there's more and more devices that are being added to the internet, refrigerators, all kinds of devices, anything you could imagine, billions of them. So with all this information that's being collected, big data, which is a big part of SAP, you can begin to leverage that and tie that together. So I'd like to introduce John Irvin, and John will take a couple other ones.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Irvin. I am the Director of Digital Transformation for LeverX. I was previously with SAP, and before that, Right Hemisphere. And Right Hemisphere is the company that invented the visual enterprise that SAP acquired it from in 2011. So I spent my whole 35-year career working with PLM, CAD systems, visualization, and I'm very passionate about these things. So once you have a library, in our case, ECC or S4HANA, full of 3D digital twins, we can do wonderful things like create manufacturing visual work instructions, where we have interactive 3D work instructions which will tell the operator step by step what to assemble at each work cell of a line, for example. And if we spend the time to create the manufacturing work instructions, which are assembly work instructions, we simply can pick a single button inside of our authoring tool and those instructions, and then we have disassembly instructions. And those are very helpful for people in the service and maintenance industry. So all of these areas, all of these lines of business can be helped and supported through digital twin visualization. Back to you, Dave.
Great. Thank you, John and Peter. So again, everyone, if you've got the panel there on the right-hand side, feel free as we walk through this session to log your questions, as we will be doing our best to answer as many of those as possible. So let's start really at the very beginning. You know, Pete mentioned a couple of things. Your organization has made an investment into a CAD system, or depending on how your organization has come together, you may have multiple CAD systems. But the reality is that as soon as you design a part, you then simply have to go through some certain processes that may be sourcing decisions, right? By that I mean a make or a buy decision. If it's a buy decision, then there's obviously a contract let with a vendor, and there may be some information in that CAD file that is going to expedite your supplier's ability to produce a first-time quality part. And that's really where I would say we kind of set the stage here when we talk about moving those assets across multiple discipline processes. Ultimately, I think these things kind of manifest in two areas, right? There's an impact to your business, and there's really kind of what are those stakeholders experiencing, and that's anchored here by the term customer experience. So I'm going to invite Peter to lean in and talk a little bit about those two areas of this particular process.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, the biggest impact right now is you're able to now leverage all the CAD data that gets developed. That means your CAD models and your 2D data, you're able to pull that out of the CAD system and generate the lightweight files that are needed for all the other back-end processes. So that's the number one thing, being able to reuse your engineering data. Before, it was sort of siloed in the CAD world, and you had to go out and buy a CAD license, and the purchasing people would not know how to use the CAD system, and maybe a couple people in manufacturing, and that got quite expensive. But now, being able to take these 3D CAD models and drawings and generate the lightweight data that can then be made available very easily via a browser to everybody on the back end. So that's going to simplify your data and your reuse of all your engineering data. And also, you're going to be able, regardless of what CAD system you use, like Dave said, many companies have several, then you're able to use this process that we're going to show you to generate automated models right off of any one of those different CAD systems. So that allows you to leverage the data regardless of the system that authored the data, bring it into SAP today, right now, and be able to share that and use it with the back-end folks. And why? Because today's people are much more visual. The users, they're not like us older dinosaurs that we read documents and we go through text to find structures. These folks aren't like that. They want to see an image, they want to click on an image, they want to see what they want to see, and that's it. So the data being visual now is much easier to consume and understand. So you get a lot of better, quicker decisions, a lot of good information that's available. So I'm going to pass it to John, and he's going to show you a little bit on how this is going to work.
Thank you, Pete. All right, what I'm going to show you is a trigger, how we initiate a translation process to create digital twins and store data inside of SAP. I'm going to show you how that works. Now, on our servers in reality, this is all code. This is all logic. So what I'm going to show you is what the logic does, but I'm going to show you in a manual process. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off this video. And what's happening here is I've got a folder which has externalized CAD data from my PLM system. It contains my master CAD data and a manifest XML file. Think of a manifest XML file as a roadmap for the BOM for Visual Enterprise Generator. Think of Visual Enterprise Generator as a scriptable conversion engine. So what the logic does is it externalizes the release. We trigger upon a workflow event, like a release event, and it externalizes that CAD data into a folder. It creates the manifest XML file. It zips them all together into a single file, and then it copies them to the VEG hot folder. A VEG hot folder is kind of like a service bureau, what we used to call in the old days. It sits there and it watches for data to be put into it. Once data is put into it, like we're going to see right now, we're going to drag that zip file containing the master CAD data and the XML file into the hot folder. Notice it disappeared. That means our trigger in Visual Enterprise Generator has successfully initiated. Now we're going to go into the Visual Enterprise Generator Administrator tool. We have to authenticate our way in. Once we do that, we have many choices, but we're going to pick the Job Monitor tab on the left, which is already pre-selected. And if you see those green and red bars, you'll see that we have a trigger that has been initiated. And so this is what we call the VDI process, Visual Design Integration Process for SAP Visual Enterprise Generator. What it's doing is it's creating the lightweight digital twin files, which are going to be in the VDS file format, Visual Design Streaming, but it's going to also create document info records, materials if necessary, and it's going to link all those together and create that document original under the document info record. So that's how we get our data triggered and inside of ECC or S/4HANA. Back to you, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you, John. we've kind of already tipped on this. I don't see any questions in the question tab, so in the interest of time, let's keep plowing forward. But John has already talked a little bit in that last scenario of how automated integration is important and how a trigger point such as an engineering release is going to drive some downstream processes and the appropriation of the creation and the storage of those files for those other organizations that are now going to consume them. And that's what we're going to talk about here, right? Is now that we've got the digital assets, how do we begin to consume those, into what processes, and where does the value add from the human come into? So similar kind of format, I'm going to kick it over to Pete, let him talk a little bit about the business impact and the customer experience.
Thanks again, Dave. Business impact is pretty big here because now you're able to take and add all the visuals to the back-end processes. And where processes typically there was an engineering process, a manufacturing process, there was all these small processes that weren't linked together. But now what you can do is you can create processes that call each other processes. So at LeverX, we have a tool called Integrated Process Solution, and this does exactly that. It's a simple add-on to SAP where you're able to leverage the SAP Workflow, the most powerful workflow there is probably, and then along with a lot of the different statuses and notifications and functional capabilities with SAP. And we can tie that together with these integrated business processes that are very intelligent. So with a set of rules, you can make sure that you get the right information, which is now visually supported. So there's certain files that are needed in certain formats by certain people in different locations within the organization. IPS can collect that appropriate information and run that through a process based on the rules that you put in and say, oh, this goes to this certain airplane and it goes on this certain wing. Those people will all be notified about the information that is included here that they need to leverage and send out to people in the supply chain to collaborate or for purchasing, to buy and quote parts, those kind of things. So now the processes are no longer simple in a certain area, but they're true end-to-end processes. And these processes using templates can be created by your users. So now you don't have to wait in the queue with the IT group and have somebody with ABAP skills have to develop a bunch of workflow. You can take a template, you can use some drag and drop capabilities, you can add some ad hoc users, and then the workflow will progress. And it calls smaller workflows along the way. So as you need this workflow or it needs to go to that person, it's not a giant workflow like it used to be in the old days, but very intelligent linked small workflows that work together. And the user experience is this. You have very nice visuals now in all the processes available in the right formats to all the people downstream. And these are now true end-to-end processes. So big companies like out there that are competing with SAP that talk about they have process integration, we have that today in SAP. You don't have to buy anything extra. The integrated process solution working with SAP Workflow allows you to use the digital twin or thread technology and share that today with all the people in the organization. So maybe, John, you could give them a little visual on this.
Yeah, so what I'm going to show now is Visual Enterprise Generator. We saw that it initiated the trigger, and we saw that the job is running. Well, now I'm going to show you what you see inside of ECC or S4HANA once the VDI process is run. So what we're doing is we're running a CV03N transaction, which is search document. We're looking for a document info record created by Visual Enterprise Generator. We found the one it just created. We're opening it up, navigating our way through. We're going to go ahead and pick that top level. There are structured DIRs beneath that match the BOM of the CAD data. CAD is always master. These are digital twins that are synchronized with your CAD release data. They always match the latest release level. And notice there's a VDS file there under the Document Originals tab. And we're opening the Visual Enterprise Viewer from right inside ECC or S/4HANA. And now what we're going to see is the 3D object that we translated, which happens to be a section of an airplane fuselage inside of its tooling fixture holding it. So now we can navigate. This is fully interactive in the viewer. We're going to go ahead and open up the BOM, the bill of materials, and we can see each and every component, part, and child assembly. They cross-highlight. We can select them either from the BOM or on the screen, and they will highlight, and we can zoom up on things, rotate, of course, and you know, manipulate our object any way we want to make sure that that's the asset we want to work with, maybe before we start one of our business processes. Back to you, Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Let's take a quick second. I want to just highlight what you showed about, because to me that was pretty exciting, right? You've got the confluence of a tooling, we'll call it design. You've designed a fixture there to hold a section of an aircraft, and you actually have the product model, right? That being the aircraft. Both basically merged in space in a very usable fashion that is allowing somebody to determine how best to assemble an aircraft structure. So to me, it's beyond just the ease and accessibility of being able to publish, but as Pete talked about, right, putting it down into small enough chunks that it's usable for the consumers to add their value, which is their insight on how to go ahead and create that manufacturing best practice. So that puts us really kind of right about the halfway point now in our presentation. And what we're really going to do now is we're going to continue to expand on what we've been talking about, and that is how do we stitch things from an end-to-end process. You heard me talk in the very beginning. You've got a design, you go through kind of a sourcing exercise. What do you make? What do you buy? Even those things that you buy have to be brought to your factory at the time that they intercede with those things that you make. And so no surprise here, right? Pete's going to come in and talk about the business impact and the customer experience as we plow forward.
Thanks again, Dave. Okay, so one of the most important things is when you're generating all these files, you need to keep them related and maintained together. And one of the best kept secrets in SAP is the document management system. It's been there day one from SAP, even back when I was there, and it's a safe and secure area. So to be able to keep your files organized, related to the original CAD models, and stored in an area that it's safe, that people have no backdoors in to steal information, that's your SAP document management system. So that's a big impact to the business. It keeps things secure and organized. And being in the DMS system, now it's very easy to maintain and share the data with people outside the enterprise and within the enterprise. So you want to share it via the integrated process solution to people inside the organization. It's very simple. You just use the workflow capabilities and the intelligence that you build in there with your rules to be able to have the system interrogate where this information needs to go and get it to the right people at the right time. And then you can also extend this out. So external suppliers that are working in your supply chain can also receive this information, look at it, work on it, submit it back, and collaborate together. And these visual files really, really help quite a bit when you're sharing information, particularly with outside folks. Also, you can create some visual routings. That's where the work gets done. John's going to talk you through that a little bit, and you'll see that. But that's a big thing now, because now we're actually tying together engineering and manufacturing in a visual way. So everybody kind of sees what's coming from engineering and what manufacturing needs to do. From a customer experience is digital twin, digital thread technology promotes reuse of data. That means that, you know, if I'm looking for a screw, when I see a visual of that screw, it's much easier for me to say, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for, versus having to dig through a bunch of text. So it promotes people rather than to go out like we did in the old days and say, all right, I'm going to just design the screw because I can't find it. So now I got 5 screws with different part numbers that are all the same. Nobody has that problem, right? But to eliminate those kind of things, reuse is a big deal. And you're going to get quicker and better decisions because visual information always is easier to consume. And John's going to show you a little bit about how you can create a new BOM off an existing BOM. And this is some of the great things that you'll be able to do here with this new solution. So John?
Thank you, Pete. So now what I'm going to take you through is yet another tool in the Visual Enterprise suite of applications. And this one is called Visual Manufacturing Planner. SAP calls it the Structure Manager. So if I kick this video off for you, what we're going to see here is we're going to start by creating a planning scope. But first we have to turn VMP Visual Manufacturing Planner on. We do that by running the transaction VMP_maintain. That takes us into our planning scope. We can create a new one, or we can search for an existing material. So what we're going to do is we're going to search for that same material that I showed you that Visual Enterprise Generator previously created. And we're going to search for that. There it is right there. Same one I showed you the 3D on. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to select that, and we're going to select Start Planning. And that's actually going to take us into the Visual Manufacturing Planner main menus, main window. And this is, we start by transforming a BOM. That's very important. And say we want to take an engineering BOM to a manufacturing BOM, because we all know the folks in manufacturing like to structure their BOM based on how things are sequenced and how they go together. They might have to add things that aren't visual, like grease or maybe zippy ties or something like that. So we start by transforming the BOM. You see the same BOM I showed you in the viewer a moment ago. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new BOM. That's what's happening right now. And then once we have that bill of materials, and I'm just going to go ahead and slide this forward a little bit. And what we're doing is now we're creating a routing. So we have our manufacturing bill of materials already created from our engineering bill of materials in this example. And now we're working on creating a routing. For those of you who don't know what a routing is, that's simply which parts get consumed in each specific build operation. But that's important information to know because it lets you know when you need to order new stock so you can keep your production line running. So we create these things called routings, and they tell us what gets assembled at each step of the build process. Now, the other really cool byproduct, not only does it create a new bill of materials for you, in this case, the manufacturing bill of materials, not only does it create a routing for you, it also gives us what's called a visual work instruction seed file. And the visual work instruction seed file is what we're going to start with in another tool called Visual Enterprise Author to extend even farther and make our assembly, disassembly operations and basically making our 3D animated work instructions. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is with our synchronized digital twin CAD data that's coming in from our master CAD system or PLM system, when the VDI workflow process creates those digital twins, it makes them a specific document type inside of ECC or S/4HANA, and that's called a VED document by default, Visual Enterprise Document. When we save this seed file, I'm going to slide the video bar again so we can get to where we save the seed file, which is right here. Then that is going to be a different document type of VWI, Visual Work Instruction. You might think to yourself, well, why do we want to have two document types? And there's a really good reason. we want to keep our synchronized CAD data in tune with exactly what's released from, our PLM and CAD systems. So that's why those are VED documents. Then when we take and create this seed file, we want it to be a different document type, so both of these can be under their own separate change control. So that's why we use two document types. And right here's where it finishes, and it's creating the seed file right now, and there we have it. So that's our visual manufacturing planner demo. Very, very powerful tool. It promotes reuse, like Pete said, and it creates some very powerful business objects that many users can use downstream inside of the SAP environment. Back to you, Dave.
Great. Thank you, John. So we're doing well on time. While you guys were busy talking, I was taking a peek at the questions. So not unsurprising. So we will get to both of them. But for Pete and John's perspective, interest in other industries such as construction, and they're going to want to understand how many file types that we support. And then a couple of questions in there really for you, Pete, as it relates to maintaining synchronization. So the good news is that this is our last section, so we'll be able to get through this, and it looks like we're going to have at least about 12 to 15 minutes for questions. So I appreciate the questions that are in there, and we acknowledge those, and we'll get to those shortly. So as Pete and John were kind of showing, right, we're driving towards the outcome. The whole reason you would go through this kind of publishing and creating the lightweight format is so that other users, if you think all the way back to the very beginning, whether those are manufacturing, whether those are your plant equipment, whether those are training, marketing, or even contracting assets that needed to be created. And so hopefully what you'll see is kind of in this last section is really just how easy, and then ultimately how the products in the portfolio add value to one another. We've heard John talk a little bit about routings and authoring and generator, and we're going to kind of bring all that home in this next section. So as we think about digital outcomes and where you are in your organization, let's talk a little bit about the business impact and the customer experience. And for that, we're going to bring in Peter again.
Okay, thank you. Business impact is big on this because really now you're leveraging your CAD master data to make visual work instructions. And these visual work instructions are great because they help you on the assembly floor. People, how do you assemble this? I wish I had this one. I remember building the first bicycle for my daughter, and I was trying to put it together, and I had to go through the manual, and things are always missing. And here with a visual work instruction, it's step by step. It's like a YouTube. So very much people are starting to use visual instructions all over the place to be able to help them understand what they're doing and how to do it quicker and how to do it better. You can also quickly and easily share your visual data. I remember the days when you wanted to share data, you had to download the viewer and install it on your PC. And there was always a problem. It wouldn't install, this wasn't working, you need this Java level, all these kind of things would happen, where now it's a simple open up the browser and there you go, off it runs. So being able to share this information quickly with people outside the enterprise as well as inside is the big deal, big business impact. From customer experience, where are you going to use these kind of things? The examples go on, but like in the engineering area where I come from, design reviews are being done all the time. As you're going through the product development process, people have to look at things, agree to it, make changes. All this kind of information now being visual and much easier to share makes that whole process much simpler to do. And you can see now with COVID, that's what people are doing. People are at home being able to share visual information remotely and still be able to get their work done rather than sitting in a room looking at poster boards and sharing a single screen. Training is another area where you're able to be able to use this information, because you can now use these visuals to do all kinds of training requirements. And one of the key things, most important probably of all, is the fact that the visuals can help you with language barriers. So if you're sending information around people globally, like many companies do nowadays for a global economy, so people can look at the visuals and understand what they need to do much better than having to read through text and all the things that they need to do. And then finally, where David mentioned, how do you tie this all together? These are end-to-end business processes. So now you could, within any SAP user interface, for any SAP object, we can build workflows, very simple, business users can, to include these objects and have these workflow templates call the appropriate workflows that are needed to go to the right people at the right time. So SAP's always been about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And that single source of the truth, and with IPS, you're able to tie that all together, add your visuals in, and you have a complete package. And you can do it today. Hey, John, you want to show them?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I've proved to you that I know how to make a video of myself making the click. So I'm going to actually do something live for you now. So I'm going to come out of the presentation for a moment, and I'm going to go into Visual Enterprise Viewer. And this is the same viewer that we saw inside of ECC or S4HANA. This is the exact same object, and I can see my BOM. And this is a 100% match of what the bill of materials look like in CAD. So this is our engineering bill, EBOM. And I can see all the components, and I can also see what we call steps. A lot of manufacturers like to call them operations. So this is a step-by-step visual work instruction. I can rotate it around, I can zoom in, zoom out, I can pan left and right. I still get the cross highlighting if I'm in the BOM, where I can select an object here and it'll highlight in the BOM, or I can select an object here and it'll highlight on the screen. That's cross highlighting. And then why don't we play a few of these? So we're going to, this is what our operators would see on the shop floor that maybe were assembling something. And they can play these automatically at a predetermined interval, or they can advance them themselves. And Pete said it's kind of like YouTube, but to me it's like YouTube on steroids, because this is not a video. This is fully interactive. So if something was in the way, they could simply hide it to get behind something. Once they were done, they can reset and it goes right back to where it was. They can cut sections. They can measure. They can collaborate by view and markup. So this is one of the final end products, a visual work instruction. And we create these visual work instructions in Visual Enterprise Author, and I'll bring that tool up real quick. And this is the exact same file I was showing you in the viewer, but this is actually the product. This is a client tool. We take that seed file that was created by Visual Manufacturing Planner, and what that starts us off with is all of our steps, because it used the routing and it knows what each build operation is. So what Visual Manufacturing Planner did for us is it structured our build operations with all the correct parts in each build operation. And that's a big time saver for someone who's now going to use this Visual Enterprise Author tool to further extend the file and create some animations for visualization like I played for you a moment ago. So, and you might think, well, do I have to use Visual Manufacturing Planner to create that seed file? The answer is no, you don't. You could, take a copy of the digital twin VED document and then make it a VWI document and start creating your build operations, your steps from scratch. But boy, what a time saver it is if it was already pre-planned and all the right parts were in all the right build operations. So Really powerful end-to-end process, a true end-to-end process, as Pete says. This promotes secure sharing of engineering data throughout your enterprise and supply chains. Like I mentioned, engineering design review and markup, supply chain collaboration and quoting, visual decision making, training collaterals, and I just covered some assembly instructions, and we can't forget about our maintenance friends, and they like disassembly instructions. And you know, one thing I didn't talk about earlier, but this also plays into the EAM workspace. So if you have your factory floor and all your equipment in 3D, you can do very similar business processes to what we've showed you here for manufacturing and engineering. So that's all I have for that. Back to you, Dave.
All right, John. So we have 2 slides, and then we're going to clear the buffer of questions. So now's a great time. If you've thought of one, please go ahead and submit it. So what you see here now on the screen is kind of what John said, right? Because it is a family of products or a portfolio of solutions, depending on the use case for your organization or even your industry, right? You know, we all have kind of aerospace backgrounds, so we've got some folks on here from the construction industry, probably have some folks on here from industrial machineries and components, maybe even some folks from automotive. But the net of it is that based on your organization's use case, right, we will compile the portfolio of the solutions that will ultimately ask you to execute your mission. And speaking of execute missions, I know we've been making John do a lot of the heavy lifting, but we're not going to let him off the mat yet. John, why don't you just kind of take the audience through the ones on this list that we've actually seen in action today, whether those were your videos or when you went kind of four-wheeling and off-roading with the actual live demo.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Dave. All right, so the very first one I showed you was the hot folder, the watched folder, if you will, for the 3D Visual Enterprise generator. And we think of the generator as a scriptable automation engine. Of course, it does CAD conversion, but it can do so many other powerful things. Business data creation inside of ECC or S/4HANA. It can create materials. It can link objects together. It can publish to specific formats if you have a supplier that needs a 3D PDF or a DXF file. The Visual Enterprise reads and writes over 120 different formats. So very powerful, and that's the heart of the Visual Enterprise. And then what I just showed you a few moments ago, after we verified that the data was inside of ECC or S/4HANA, I showed you a Visual Manufacturing Planner. And that's where we create and edit BOMs and materials. So we can create and edit a BOM, a material, create a routing, and then that uploaded VDS file. It stores that right inside that document info record where our digital twin master is that's synchronized with CAD. And that's another reason why we have 2 document types. Finally, I showed you Visual Enterprise Viewer. That was early on once we proved that the data was inside of SAP. And then finally, I showed you Author. And Author is where we extend the data and create the animations and the notes and the picture in view, picture in pictures and things of that nature. We have 2 more products that we didn't show you today, and I'll just cover those. I'll spend about 20 seconds on those. There's also the Visual Interaction Toolkit for SAP UI5. That's a free SDK, very powerful. This is how you can embed the browser inside of a Chrome or a Firefox or something like that, and create your own applications even using the Visual Enterprise technology. And then SAP Engineering Control Center is a very important product too. Think of that as a portal view, DMS on steroids, if you will. Has dozens and dozens of SAP transactions in a visual GUI, graphical user interface, so we can bring up any SAP business object. The Visual Enterprise Viewer is embedded inside of Engineering Control Center, so that's why it's part of the portfolio of Visual Enterprise end-to-end products. Back to you, Dave.
Okay, great, John. So why don't you go ahead and let's go to the next slide. I know Pete's going to do the heavy lifting here. So John, you can go ahead and start focusing on the questions that are in the questions tab. There's a couple of them there. And as I mentioned earlier, right, ones that we were hoping we would get asked. So Pete, we've got about maybe a minute and a half. You want to go ahead and cover off on the most salient points on this particular slide.
Yep. Basically, the important points to think about here and your take-home homework, basically, is you can now have business processes that include visuals that can be shared across the entire enterprise. So whatever format a file is needed will be tagged with an intelligent business process and sent to the appropriate people that need that information in the format that they need it. So you're leveraging what was done in engineering, these CAD models. You're creating the lightweight files in the formats that you need. You're able to share them internally with your project teams, your entire enterprise, and also share them outside with external people. So within your supply chain. So now you have integrated intelligent business processes supported by visuals available to both your internal and your external people. And now you're going to be able to leverage this digital twin technology today. You don't have to wait till tomorrow or wait for something to get developed. It's available in SAP today. And like John had mentioned earlier, the Engineering Control Center, that's your integration platform for any CAD system. So any CAD system working within the Engineering Control Center, providing these 3D models directly into S4 and into DMS. And below here are some of the different, I won't go through each of them, but these are different areas that it's being used in. And this list is getting bigger and bigger all the time because we're expanding it out to a lot of different areas. So that's it.
All right. I think I will go ahead and start answering questions if that's okay with you, Dave.
Yeah, let's go ahead and advance the slide because that's the one we wanted to persist during the question and answer. Actually, this is the one just to prove that we all have what we would call a face for radio. So thank you for humoring us with your webcam. This is the slide. This is the slide, John. This next one. And now you can, yeah, just go. There you go. There you go. Now you can go ahead and dig right into the questions, which you've been wanting to do for 3 dry runs as we've prepared for this. Take it away, John.
All right, just give me a second. I am expanding. I had to undock that window. The questions were so small, I was struggling to see them. So let me get this thing.
While you're doing that, John, I just want to mention a couple things. Key in on these 3 options. You have the ECTR, like John just talked about, for integration to CAD systems, because SAP has integrations to all the major mechanical and electrical CAD systems available. So you can use the ECTR platform to integrate them. Also, John showed you the Visual Enterprise Generator hot folder. So how we can use any CAD system if they're not integrated to generate the information and bring it into SAP. And finally, PLM integration. So regardless of what PLM solution you're using, Teamcenter or a Windchill or the Dassault 3DX, Novia product, you have bi-directional integration between SAP and these solutions. So something to think about if you're using them and you have some sunk costs and you want to tie it to SAP.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, I'm gonna start with our questions. I'm gonna take them in the order that they were received, and I have 10 minutes. I'll try to get through as many as I can. We have quite a few. The ones that I don't get to, if that's the case, I will go ahead and fill them out, and there will be some follow-up emails after this webinar. I'll make sure each and every question gets answered if I don't get to them all. So question number 1. Do the lightweight digital twin files stay in sync with the CAD engineering changes? And how many CAD formats are supported by Visual Enterprise? Great question. So yes, with what I showed you with the logic in the hot folder trigger, it's triggered upon a life cycle release event in a lot of the systems we set up. It can be any workflow trigger you would like, but CAD release is a huge one in our engineering change process. So that every time another engineering change happens, it sends that new XML file and that new CAD data to Visual Enterprise Generator. And Visual Enterprise Generator, here's the cool thing. It knows what it's already translated and what is at the same revision. It only translates the deltas, what's new, and then it makes the new visuals and the new document info record structure at a higher version. Next question. I'm in the construction industry. Our CAD tool is Revit. I've seen that VE can support IFC file. Yes, it can. And as I said earlier, it's part of the last question. Visual Enterprise reads and writes over 120 different formats, and I've been with the Visual Enterprise product line for almost 20 years now, and I have met darn few formats in that 20 years that the Visual Enterprise doesn't support out of the box. There are some plugins out there for, say, the oil and gas and the construction industries, that if you're not using Revit, because Revit is supported out of the file format, where you can even get, shipbuilding and plant building and that type of data in. If all else fails, 3D objects can be white laser scanned as well. And it says, have you seen Visual Enterprise applied? Absolutely. We have many construction companies that we've helped over the years between Right Hemisphere, SAP, and LeverX. And it's a great way for them to show their building before it's actually assembled. It's also a great way to do your project management, because for a large construction project, you can imagine that there's a lot of suppliers and vendors that you're dealing with, and you got to stay on top of them all. Well, visually, you don't have to go to the job sites all the time. You can see your building build in real time by 3D data simulation. Let's see what else. And I see the capital WF, I would assume that's workflow. The workflow is in that core SAP or IPS. Okay, so SAP comes with a workflow tool that is very complicated. LeverX has a piece of software that we sell called IPS, Integrated Process Solution, and it simplifies, it takes months of workflow building into hours or days of workflow building. Very simple user interface, very easy to train people to create their own workflows, 10 times quicker than it can happen inside of SAP. So that's the IPS product for that. Let's see here.
Yeah, those are, just to expand on that, it's 2 transports in the SAP, and you configure it in the IMG like you do for any SAP solution. And it comes with a whole host of templates for all these different processes that you can then use and modify. It's drag and drop. So training, we've gone into customers where we saw their ECN process for that first 5 minutes and then built the workflows for them in that day. So it's very, very powerful, and it leverages all the great functionality within SAP.
All right, I'm going to take our next question. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for expanding. One of our users, am I looking at an MBOM or a VE structure? Okay, so you were looking at a VE structure to begin with, because CAD is master. So when we do the data translation, that is our opportunity in Visual Enterprise Generator to take exactly what's in CAD and respect that, or to reorganize our BOM. Remember, I told you Visual Enterprise Generator is a scriptable engine. So maybe you want to change your part numbers to actual material numbers, or maybe you'd like to do some BOM reorganization. You can do that as you're translating the data for that end deliverable. Now, with respect to Visual Manufacturing Planner, the user would also like to know how are non-geometric components handled. Well, when you create that routing, there's a menu icon in there that will let you insert any non-geometric component that you need in your BOM, and it still gets added to your BOM. And yes, you started off looking at a CAD structure, but this visual manufacturing planning tool saves the SAP business object bill of materials as well. So when I told you I started with a CAD structure, and I took the EBOM and the CAD structure, and I created the MBOM as an SAP business object bill of material. Does this tool integrate with the PM module in SAP? Pete, that's one for you. What's the PM module? I'm drawing a blank.
That's the plant maintenance.
Oh, absolutely. Use cases for the EAM, plant maintenance. We have a lot of our customers that have 3D models for their entire plants and all of their equipment. So when they want to do preventive maintenance, or maybe they've got a failure, they're dispatched through IPS, the workflow tool Pete talked about, and then it tells them exactly which item is down or needs to be repaired. There are GIS tags on everything, so they know exactly where that piece of equipment is located, and then they've got the visual work instruction to disassemble and repair or perform maintenance right there in their inbox as well in IPS. So it's basically given them their work assignment and every supporting piece of data they need to perform that plant maintenance. So it definitely plays in that space.
John, let me expand on that a little. The last real Sapphire we had, we were at SAP at our booth, shared with the SAP folks, and we were able to show that integration between IPS, ECTR, and IoT. So the sensors on the robot were able to say that there was an issue with a tire, which used IPS to send a ticket to inform the folks in the engineering side that there was an issue with this particular object. They were able to go into the CAD system, make a change, publish it back in, the ticket resolved, and then IoT started working and the robot started working again. So that's an actual, we got it viewed, or we have it saved so we could make it available as well.
All right, thanks, Pete. That's cool. Okay,
John,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say we have about 90 seconds left, so I would think you can go ahead and take your last answer. We will have to go with the methodology you talked about. In respect for everyone's time, go ahead and answer the last question and then bring this session to a wrap, please.
I will do. When you're using a work instruction, is time being tracked? So yeah, tact and cycle time can be added through that visual interaction toolkit I showed you. In fact, we've already done that for a customer. So yes, you can take and time these things in cycle time and tact time. Okay, Dave, I promise I'll answer the rest of these questions. I appreciate everybody taking the time to type all the questions, and I'll make sure you all get answers. And there's a handout here in this webinar. If you want to download the presentation we gave today, it's included right here today. Just click the handouts button. Back to you, Dave.
No, John, Pete, I want to thank you for the opportunity to educate all of the people. It looks like at the high water mark, we had about 60 people, but we're starting to drop off as everybody's probably coming up against their concurrent top of the hour meetings. So on behalf of SAP, I want to thank LeverX for the opportunity to be the moderator and to bring attention about Industry 4.0 and why digital matters, and ultimately how easy digital can be made for all of the stakeholders in your organization. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with us this afternoon.
Yes,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you
appreciate your time.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Contact us below.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.